They hid a simple test inside the human body, a threefold signature that, according to texts found at Nag Hammadi, points back to the source itself. What if I told you that same map can be read today through sound, and that Solfeggio tones offer a contemporary bridge to what esoteric tradition calls the pineal or third eye? What if this is not a promise of instant miracles but an invitation, a gentle experiment you can run on yourself to feel whether an inner recognition, an anamnesis, surfaces? If you're curious, stay with me for the next few minutes, and if this lands, comment recognition at the end. The story begins in the margins of history. In the mid-20th century, archaeologists uncovered libraries of writing, collections later known as the Nag Hammadi texts. Among these is a work sometimes called the Gospel of Philip, a text that presents teachings attributed to Jesus in a way that differs from canonical scripture. According to these Gnostic sources, there is an embodied teaching. 3 marks placed on the person that serve as signs of their connection to the monad, the primordial source. Scholars debate the dating and the meaning. What matters here is that these documents present a lineage of thought that valued inner verification over institutional mediation. For those invested in gatekeeping spiritual authority, a test you can run on yourself was always dangerous. So let us set the stakes. In Gnostic cosmology, the monad or mon is the unnameable origin, pure being. From that emanation, levels unfold, fragments of light become individualized yet forgetful. A lesser craftsman, the demiurge, fashions the visible world. Archons, literally rulers, act as the bureaucrats of concealment, maintaining systems that keep human memory dormant. That is the mythic frame. Whether one reads it as literal metaphysics or as poetic psychology, the theme is the same. Something inside you remembers, and something outside you organizes forgetting. This teaching values autonomy. If you can confirm your origin within your body, you bypass intermediaries. The 3 marks are not badges given by priests. They are visceral checks, tactile points you can gently locate and sense. Over centuries, such practices were marginalized. The institutional impulse is to control access to authority. A test that anyone can run undermines that control. Now, I will describe the 3 marks and guide you through a careful, safe self-check. Before we begin, a clear word. The material we are working with blends ancient claim and modern interpretation. According to the Nag Hammadi texts, an embodied map exists. In our time, we overlay that map with contemporary sound healing ideas and with the symbol commonly called the pineal or third eye. This overlay is a working hypothesis, a practical experiment grounded in experiential practice rather than scientific proof. Also, if you hold Orthodox Christian belief, be aware, Gnostic framings can diverge from canonical teachings. Treat this as one strand among many, not as a replacement for your tradition. Find a comfortable seat or lie down. Make sure you're warm and undisturbed. We will move slowly. Take a breath to arrive. Inhale gently, pause for a moment with the air held, then release fully, letting your shoulders drop. Do that once more to settle. There is no rush here. Everything you do is gentle, optional, and reversible. If you feel any discomfort, stop. The first mark is what the texts describe as a sign at the base of the skull, the hinge between head and neck. Place the pads of your fingers at the very top of the spine where the skull rests, at the soft indentation beneath the occipital bone. Use only light pressure. This is a sensing exercise, not a manipulation. Close your eyes if that helps. As you rest your fingers there, breathe slowly and let your attention soften into the region. Some describe a subtle warmth, a faint pulsing, or the sense of a keyed hinge, an awareness that the head is anchored to something larger. You may feel nothing at all. That too is acceptable. Notice without judgment. The second mark is lateral, on the outer edge of the hand. Bring your attention to the webbing between thumb and index finger, then slide a gentle finger along the edge toward the base of the little finger side. The tradition speaks of a tactile seal on the hand, a marker that indicates perception. Place your opposite hand over the area and let a light touch rest there while you breathe. Attend to sensations: a tiny vibration, an electric tingle, a coolness, or simply quiet. Allow memory to stir in the body rather than chase it mentally. The third mark is centered at the chest, high in the sternum at the level of the upper heart, just below the throat. Lightly place a palm there. This is the mark of command, the locus where intention and voice meet. Rest there with gentle attention. Notice whether the area feels open or constricted, warm or still. Again, these are invitations to notice, not instructions to force a change. As you perform each check, keep a mental note. Did you feel something? A pressure? A modulation in your breathing? A wave of emotion or a brief clarity? The Gnostic teaching frames these responses as signs of anamnesis, the body remembering its origin. That remembering often arrives not as a conceptual insight, but as a small, unmistakable sensation. If an inner critic speaks up, saying this is nonsense or you're imagining it, that voice is expected. In the texts, such objections are attributed to archonic interference, the mind's reflexive doubting that seeks to maintain the status quo. Treat those thoughts like static on a radio. They can confirm the presence of resistance rather than negate your experience. Now we move to the interpretive bridge. The texts speak of 3 frequencies, tone-like principles that correspond to the marks. They do not specify exact musical pitches. In contemporary practice, many sound healing traditions work with what are called Solfeggio frequencies, sets of tones that some practitioners find useful for entraining subtle perception. I want to be explicit. Mapping the 3 marks to Solfeggio tones is an experiential overlay, not a historical claim. It is a hypothesis offered as a practical tool. One useful overlay maps each mark to a tier of tone. For the base of skull mark, the mark of origin, lower frequencies that support grounding and release of fear are often used in sound healing. For the lateral hand mark, the mark of perception, mid-range frequencies associated with transformation and clarity can be useful. For the sternum mark, the mark of command, higher frequencies linked to inner hearing and intuition are suggested. Some practitioners name specific numbers. Examples include 174 or 396 Hz for grounding and release, 417 or 528 Hz for transformation and repair, and 852 or 963 Hz for higher perception and connection. These numbers are illustrative. Choose what feels resonant for you. There is no medical consensus that any frequency unlocks a gland or alters physiology. Think of the tones instead as keys used to test whether the nervous system relaxes into a different register of attention. You may be wondering, where does the pineal gland come in? In modern esoteric language, the pineal has become shorthand for the organ correlate of inner vision, the third eye. When I use that term, I do so as a contemporary metaphorical correlate, not a clinical endorsement. The ancient texts do not speak in modern anatomical terms, but they do point to an embodied sight for seeing beyond ordinary sight. Our sound practice is an attempt to engage that sight through gentle entrainment, touch to the mark, breath to steady the system, and tone to provide a patterned vibration the nervous system can follow. Before we do a guided activation, one more clear caution. This is a spiritual and experiential practice, not medical advice. If you have a history of seizures, severe mental health conditions, or are pregnant and unsure about sound work, consult a qualified healthcare provider before experimenting. Keep every movement gentle. Stop if you experience dizziness, intense headache, or discomfort. When you are ready, return to the base of skull mark with your fingers. Rest light pressure there, and take 3 slow, deep breaths. Inhale, hold briefly, and exhale fully, allowing your body to settle between each breath. As you breathe, allow attention to soften into the spine's hinge. If you are using a tone, choose a grounding solfeggio note or a low resonant sound, and allow it to play softly beneath the room's ambient sound. You do not need high volume. just enough to feel the vibration in the room and perhaps subtly in your skull. Listen with the skin of your attention. Keep your fingers gently at the base of your skull for several slow breaths. Notice if there is any shift, warmth spreading down the neck, a brief pressure behind the eyes, a subtle deepening of breath. If nothing happens, remain patient. Some sensations arrive hours or days later as quiet shifts. When you feel ready, release the touch and rest your hands. Now move to the lateral hand mark. Lightly touch the webbing and the edge on the side of the hand as you did before. Bring the mid-range tone into the sound field. Breathe softly and allow your attention to widen outward from the hand into your perception. The hand is a sensor. Our ancestors used hands to mark and to bless. Let the sound play while you attend to any micro-sensations. A tingle along the skin, a soft tightening around the jaw, an emotion that surfaces briefly and releases. Observe without commentary. Finally, place a palm at the center of your chest, at the level of the sternum below the throat. Introduce the higher solfeggio tone, a tone associated in some practices with inner hearing and spiritual sight. Rest there with the palm and breathe slowly, as if inhalation itself were a tuning curve. Some people report a pressure behind the eyes, an opening in the forehead, or a feeling of lightness in the upper chest. Others experience a flash of memory or a quiet resolve. These impressions are varied and personal. If an inner voice arrives to dismiss what you feel, note it and allow it to pass. After touching each mark with corresponding tones, take a moment of silence. Notice the interstitial space, the place between tones, between breaths, where subtle integration sometimes occurs. You may feel nothing outwardly dramatic. That is normal. A subtle clarity, a softened fear response, or even the simple knowledge that you can test your own interiority is itself significant. At this point, you may experience mental objections, doubts, narratives of rational dismissal, or small scoffing thoughts. In the language of the ancient narrative, these are often called archonic responses, structural resistances that show up whenever the system senses destabilization. Rather than arguing with these thoughts, practice a simple move. Watch them as weather. Name them quietly if that helps. Doubt, fear, dismissal, and let them pass. The very act of observing them from a place of calm undermines their capacity to dominate. If you feel moved and safe, you may speak a short personal declaration aloud. This is optional. The declaration functions like a seal, brief, centered, and repeatable. Use first-person present tense and keep it simple. If you'd like a template, you can say along these lines: I remember, I claim my sight, I speak from within. Speak it only if it resonates. Change the words so they are true to you. This is not a prayer to be recited to others. It is a personal affirmation meant to anchor the shift you have allowed. Afterwards, resist the urge to immediately prove the experience. Archonic voices thrive on provocation. Instead, let your body rest and notice how the day unfolds. You might carry a small residue of calm, a thinner edge to your habitual fears, or nothing at all. All are valid. If something does arise, an insight or a remembered image, receive it with curiosity rather than an urgent need to explain. A few practical notes about working with tones. Select recordings from reputable sound healing practitioners whose work you trust, or from sources you have used before. Keep volume moderate. If you are sensitive to loud or high-pitched sounds, lower the volume and keep the tone close to the ear rather than booming in the room. There is no single, correct frequency. The important element is resonance. Does a tone settle your attention, or does it distract you? Choose what brings your system into a quieter register. As you continue this work over time, you will likely encounter phases. Sometimes the practice will elicit soft clarity, an inner phrase, an image, a sudden compassionate decision. Other times, It will raise old discomfort that needs gentle witnessing and perhaps integration through journaling or conversation with a trusted guide. Remember that these tones are tools for attention. The underlying aim is to cultivate embodied authority, the capacity to check, to feel, and to know from within. I need to be explicit about doctrinal sensitivity. The Gnostic framing I've used, monad, demiurge, archons, three marks, represents one lineage of spiritual interpretation. Those who hold to canonical Christian doctrine may find elements here discordant with their theology. That is expected. This material is a path among many. It is not presented as a replacement for any tradition you hold sacred. Read these teachings as someone reading an alternative map that might illuminate your own interior geography. If you tried the experiment, or even if you simply resonated with the concept, consider sharing one word in the comments that describes your experience. Recognition, quiet, nothing, whatever fits. This small act of communal confirmation is itself a form of memory. Proof that others are looking too. One more practical invitation. If you want a deeper activation track, we are preparing a follow-up that will offer fuller solfeggio sequences and longer guided sessions. Subscribe so you don't miss it. To close, let me return to the image that opened this piece. They buried an accessible teaching because it made gatekeepers unnecessary. The three marks are not relics. They are prompts for self-verification. The solfeggio tones are not magical keys with guaranteed medical effects. They are contemporary instruments that, when used with care, help the nervous system reattune to a quieter, more receptive register. Whether you call what you uncover a memory, an awakening, or simply a moment of calm, the point is practical. You can test this for yourself, gently and safely, and decide what it means within the context of your life. If this word reached you, comment recognition below. Subscribe for the next video where we will offer a longer guided activation with curated tones and further maps between the three marks and sound practice. Share this with someone you trust who is exploring inner authority. We who remember do not need approval to know our own interior. We only need the courage to tend to the small signals and the patience to let them speak.